Israel's Air Force carried out strikes on the Houthis in Yemen in coordination with the Americans over the weekend as the weekly street protests against Israel were taking place in the capital of Sana'a in Yemen. The strikes hit vital infrastructure that the Houthis used to conduct their ballistic missile attacks against Israel and their targeting of shippings in the international waters of the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandab Straits. This included the Ras Isa power station and ports in Hodeidah. Following the strikes, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz declared, "We will hunt down the heads of the Houthi terror organization." Israel estimates there will be a response from the Houthis, so the alert level in Israel is high. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared, "As we promised, the Houthis are paying and will continue to pay a heavy price for their aggression." Meanwhile, in a mysterious way, a series of Houthi leaders have met their end in recent days, despite the policy of the leadership to move into underground complexes and avoid using mobile phones. On Israel's northern border, the ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah is on the brink of collapse. An IDF statement says it is still committed to the understandings with Lebanon, but Hezbollah's repeated violations of these understandings are making it very difficult. Meanwhile, American envoy Amos Hochstein informed Lebanese officials about the IDF's withdrawal from the south of the country within 2 weeks, in accordance with the ceasefire arrangement, and he recognized the new president of Lebanon. Joseph Aoun is beginning to act in his new role as president of Lebanon, and we'll tell you about his first moves. Next door in Syria, a planned attack on the Zayada Zayanab Mosque by ISIS was thwarted, and further afield, Iran has unveiled their Dormant Volcano, its new missile city. The unveiling ceremony took place over the weekend in the presence of the Supreme Commander and the Commander of the Air and Space Arm of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. However, incoming US President-elect Donald Trump is preparing to drop the hammer on Iran in a big way, and the entire region is bracing for that impact. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will take us through this and other developments over the weekend in our neighborhood. It was a difficult weekend for the IDF, losing 4 soldiers that were killed in action in the Gaza Strip. But it was also a difficult weekend for Hamas, as they were hit by continuous IDF strikes, especially in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. And meanwhile, negotiations for the release of our hostages in Gaza continue, with Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, in Qatar over the weekend to join the talks. He was also in Jerusalem over the weekend to meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. During their meetings, he stressed that Trump wants to see a deal before his inauguration on January 20th, just a week away. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel in days 463 of the war with Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and the Shia militias in Iraq. All of them are taking their orders from Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we start, I want to invite you to look for the subscribe button and click on it so that you'll never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I also want to introduce you to our sponsor for today's video, Vinia. Vinia is a nutritional supplement that enhances blood flow and boosts energy, and I use it myself. It helped me get through the very difficult months when I was serving in the IDF reserves earlier in this war. I'll tell you more about that later in the video, but first, the news. On Friday, Israel Air Force fighter jets were sent 2,000 kilometers south to attack Houthi targets in Yemen. According to the IDF, the attack was carried out in response to repeated Houthi attacks against the State of Israel, its citizens, and civilian infrastructures in the country, including launching UAVs and surface-to-surface missiles towards Israeli territory. However, this strike was not only carried out because of what the Houthis are doing to Israel, it was also carried out to push back against their attacks on international shippings, and we know because this was the first time that Israel had acted against the Houthis in a direct coordination with the British and the Americans. The strikes began around noon on Friday, with aircraft from the United States and Britain hitting underground targets deep inside northern Yemen, as well as the capital of Sana'a. A few hours later, the Israeli jets hit their targets. A team from the United States Central Command was in the Air Force's Strike Command Cell to ensure maximum coordination during the operation. The IDF spokesperson's unit said that amongst the targets attacked were infrastructure at the Houthi power station, which serves as a central electricity infrastructure for the Houthi regime. In addition, infrastructures were attacked at the Red Sea and Hudaydah ports on the western coast of Yemen. Launchers used to fire ballistic missiles were also struck. The targets attacked illustrate the military use of the Houthi terror regime is making of civilian infrastructure for terror. In footage released by the IDF, Israel's F-16 jets can be seen flying towards Yemen and carried out a mid-air refueling maneuver with a Boeing 707 from the 120th Transport Squadron. In all, over 20 Air Force planes took part in the strike, dropping about 50 munitions on 3 main targets, and, as in previous strikes, it was all done in broad daylight. According to a report by the El Masirah news portal, there was a large street demonstration in Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, in support of Hamas in Gaza at the same time as the strike hit a Houthi target nearby. The demonstration is a regular event in Sana'a, and the Allied forces obviously did not think it was necessary to interfere with it. It was enough to make the point, although there's reason to doubt that the Houthi organization will get it. A news portal affiliated with the Houthis also reported a series of 6 strikes at the Ras Isa port in the Hudaydah province. The previous strikes on Yemeni soil were on Wednesday. According to a report in Yemen, a total of about 30 strikes were carried out jointly by the United States and Israel in the Sana'a and Hudaydah provinces. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz monitored the strikes in Yemen from the Air Force Command bunker together with the Air Force Commander Major General Tomer Bar and other senior officials. Afterwards, he issued a statement to the media saying, "Today's IDF strike in Yemen is a clear and direct message to the leader of the Houthi terrorist organization, Abdul Malak el-Houthi, and to the heads of the Houthi terrorist organization in Yemen. There will be no immunity for anyone. We will hunt you down and destroy the terror infrastructure that you have built." It certainly is notable that the strong coordination between Israel and the Biden administration led to a focus on infrastructure, ports, weapons storage centers, and missile launch sites. In just over a week, a new American administration under President-elect Donald Trump will begin, and the coordination of efforts against the Houthis is expected to continue and even expand. Some Israeli intelligence officials are reportedly in favor of a pinpoint operation against Houthi leaders, including assassinations, as part of a joint international effort. European involvement in such moves is considered unlikely, but the Americans are reportedly not opposed to cooperation with these plans. We at TBN Israel work to bring you the truth about what's happening in Israel, and every financial contribution gives us the fuel to continue forward. So go to our website at tbnisrael.com/give or click the donate button on YouTube. Every dollar is helping us to create more videos and content from Israel. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank again the brave soldiers and security forces who continue fighting to keep Israel safe and work tirelessly to bring our hostages home. This past year, during my reserve service, I witnessed firsthand the sacrifices these recruits make, some of them even in their 30s and 40s, serving more than 200 days a year. It's an incredible commitment, but it's also a heavy burden, both emotionally and physically. For me, faith was my anchor. Praying every day gave me the strength to push forward. But I also found a practical boost in Vinya, an incredible Israeli innovation made from red grape cells. Vinya enhances blood flow to your heart, brain, and muscles, helping you feel more energetic, focused, and ready to take on the day. It's a natural way to support your body without the sugar or alcohol found in grapes. Vinya isn't just capsules. You can enjoy it as coffee or tea each morning, giving you a fresh, healthy start to your day. I used it daily during my service, and I still do. If you want to feel the difference for yourself, visit www.vinyatbnisrael.com or call 800-638-1944. Trust me, you won't regret it. Now, let's get back to the news and let's take a look at what's actually happening in Syria, because there's been a lot of confusing reports coming from this country in the last few days. The Syrian General Intelligence Directorate announced on Saturday that it foiled a terror attack planned at the Sayyada Zainab Mosque in the suburbs of Damascus, resulting in the arrest of those involved in the plot, according to the Lebanese newspaper El Akhbar. According to the report, the ISIS terrorist organization was behind the attempted attack. This is of interest to Israel for a few different reasons, not least because we don't want to see our northern neighbor become a failed state and an ungoverned space like Afghanistan, and this would give global terrorists and criminal syndicates a base to operate right next door to us, which would create all kinds of new problems for Israel. But before we talk about that, we need to take a look at what's happening next door in Lebanon, because events in that country also affect us here in Israel as well as Syria. Over the weekend, the IDF observed 3 suspected terrorists operating near the Israeli border in the Mount Dov area, and they were subsequently eliminated by an airstrike. A statement on the incident from the IDF spokesperson's unit said that the IDF remains committed to the understanding between Israel and Lebanon, is deployed across southern Lebanon, and will act to remove any threat to the state of Israel and its citizens. However, within the IDF, they're not satisfied with the way that the ceasefire agreement is being implemented and believe that Hezbollah is deceiving and not enforcing the agreement as worded. Israel has also sent messages to United States Special Envoy Amos Hochstein that if the Lebanese army does not increase its hold on the area close to the border, the IDF will have no choice but to remain in place. There has been some progress in implementing the ceasefire agreement. For instance, the IDF left the central town of Nakura in the western sector this week near the border by Rosh Hanikra. Photos published in the Lebanese media show the Lebanese army deploying there instead of IDF forces. On Saturday morning, the Hezbollah-affiliated news portal El Akhbar reported that Hochstein had informed the Lebanese official that the IDF would withdraw from southern Lebanon within 2 weeks. According to the report, the American promise was conveyed against the background of the conclusion of the 60-day period set in the ceasefire, which is fast approaching. Hochstein stressed to Lebanese officials that Washington is committed to ensuring the full withdrawal of IDF forces from the area per the understandings that were reached. At the same time, the American envoy demanded that the Lebanese army prepare to heighten its alert status in the south of the country to prevent a security vacuum. It was also noted that Hochstein clarified that Hezbollah must hand over all its weapons located south of the Litani River to the Lebanese army as part of steps aimed to strengthen regional stability. Personally, I don't think there's much chance that this last part will happen. But, of course, the American envoy has to say that it is necessary for it to happen just to keep up appearances. In any case, there is a new factor in the Lebanese arena, and that is the new president, Joseph Aoun. The elected Aoun, who used to be the commander-in-chief of the Lebanese National Army, gives hope for a fresh start in the Lebanese politics. The office of the president was vacant for almost 2 years, mostly because Hezbollah did not want any strong domestic opposition to their agenda, and the election of Aoun is another sign of their diminished power in Lebanon. As one of his first official acts as president, Aoun announced that consultations in parliament for appointing a new prime minister will begin this coming Monday, aiming to complete the formation of the country's constitutional institutions. The president's inaugurational speech, delivered after he swore his constitutional oath, was widely appreciated due to the main points that he raised, as Aoun pledged to implement them in order to restore state authority and build its institutions. However, the new president in Lebanon faces significant challenges in light of the severe crisis the country has suffered in recent years. And the greatest challenge of all is implementing the ceasefire and Israel's withdrawal, as well as the long overdue implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development in the northern arena. To help you gain a better understanding of these developments, TBN Israel's Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will now give us an in-depth look at the latest developments with the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps. Iran's new missile city was unveiled in the presence of its supreme commander and the commander of the IRGC Aerospace Force over the weekend, just a few days before the inauguration of United States President-elect Donald Trump. Mati, do you think that this will have any effect on Trump's plans to return to the maximum pressure policy against Iran? If so, what will be the consequences?
Wow, Yair. Those are some difficult but very important questions for the start of the new week. This past weekend, during wide-scale military exercises, Iran revealed a new underground missile city for the production of advanced weapon systems, including new missiles and UAVs. The unveiling comes against the backdrop of mounting tensions with Israel and concerns about a tougher American policy under incoming President Donald Trump. According to Iranian state television, the drill, which began January 4th and will last 2 months, includes training by the Iranian air defense system against missile, aircraft, and electronic warfare threats under simulated battlefield conditions. Iranian state media reported that as part of the exercise, the Revolutionary Guard has already practiced defending the Natanz nuclear facility from simulated missile and UAV attacks. According to a Reuters report, the drill takes place amid a challenging period for Iran after suffering severe blows in the regional arena. Israeli strikes against Hezbollah in Lebanon and the removal last month of its main ally, President Bashar al-Assad in Syria. In a speech broadcast on Iranian state television, IRGC commander General Hossein Salami referred to these defeats but warned against what he called a false sense of joy among Iran's enemies, declaring that Iran's military power, especially its missile forces, are stronger than ever. Candidly, it's difficult for me to imagine that he expects any serious person to take this statement seriously. But as is so often the case, the truth is the first casualty of war. And here in the Middle East, that is even more true than it is anywhere else. In any event, a recent report by a Reuters news agency included a recording of a conversation between senior Iranian officials in which General Bahrouz Asbati, who reportedly served in Syria, admits that Iran lost badly there, so maybe when they're speaking among themselves, they're willing to face the truth. Elsewhere, Keith Kellogg, the American envoy to Ukraine, recently attended an Iranian opposition conference in Paris, during which he called for a return to the maximum pressure policy against Iran. He said it's necessary to exploit the regime's weakness to bring about change. He's referring, of course, to the policy implemented by the Trump administration in 2018 after the US withdrew from the nuclear deal, the JCPOA. The aim of this policy was to apply economic pressure on Iran in order to compel it to renegotiate its nuclear program, including additional constraints on its nuclear activities. This could also expand to address Iran's ballistic missile program and support for regional terrorist groups and criminal syndicates. Trump, who will take office on January 20th, has already declared that he intends to revert to the policy he led in his previous term. But even before the return of President Trump, Israel has inflicted a great deal of damage on Iran over the past year. The regional balance of power has shifted against the Iranian leadership following the fall of the Assad regime in Syria and the crushing blow dealt to its most important ally, Hezbollah, in its war with Israel. Perhaps it's time for Western governments to abandon their old policy and stand with the Iranian people this time, helping free them from the tyranny of that awful regime. And now, back to you, Yair.
Thank you, Mati. Now, before we go on to what's happening in the Gaza Strip and the latest negotiations to release our hostages held in the wicked, inhumane hands of the Hamas terrorists in Gaza, I want to call on you to stay focused on the truth. We, at TBN Israel, bring you the most up-to-date English language news site on what's happening in Israel. So, check out our website, tbnisrael.com/news, to stay aligned with the truth. Moving on to the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the IDF managed on Saturday morning to intercept a rocket that crossed in southern Gaza above the Kerem Shalom area. And elsewhere, reports in Palestinian media portals on Saturday indicated that 3 people had been killed in an airstrike on a residential building in the Rimal neighborhood of western Gaza City. They also reported an airstrike east of the El Burij camp in central Gaza and tank shelling northwest of the Rafah city. The Rimal neighborhood is considered Gaza's upscale neighborhood where Hamas's senior commanders live. According to the IDF, they exploited the civilian area for operational planning and directing terrorism. Military posts and government buildings also exist in that neighborhood. And the IDF also reported that 4 soldiers from the Nahal Brigade were killed in action when they encountered an improvised explosive device in Beit Hanun. 6 other soldiers were wounded in that incident, 2 of them seriously. The ambush was sprung on the soldiers as they traveled in Humvees on the outskirts of Beit Hanun. As soon as the IEDs were detonated, fire was opened on the convoy with small arms. The rainy conditions hampered the response, but IDF forces have been operating in the Beit Hanun area for about 2 weeks, and the assessment is that the activity will be completed in a few more weeks. The IDF emphasized that there is still a broad scope of tunnels in that area and in the Gaza Strip overall. There remain militants who continue to fight, as well as newly recruited ones who mostly prefer to leave booby traps for the IDF to find rather than engage in face-to-face combat. In addition to the hazards that the IDF forces are facing on the ground in Gaza, there is currently terrible pressure on the IDF from global legal bodies, causing it to fight with more caution. This costs the lives of our soldiers and also causes moral issues in the ranks. In my personal opinion, this is outrageous, and it is very counterproductive to the goal of bringing this war to a successful conclusion in the near-term future, which will be to the benefit of everyone, especially the civilian population of Gaza. These self-described human rights activists who are putting pressure on the IDF to fight Hamas in a way that does not endanger civilians are actually harming the prospects of those civilians for a better future. They are also placing the IDF soldiers in an unbearable position, and as an IDF soldier in the reserves myself, I take that personally. We hope that soon we'll see the IDF once again exploiting its tactical advantage in fighting Hamas's guerrilla army in northern Gaza. This includes the fact that the IDF has night vision equipment which allows it to operate in the dark. The IDF must also allow to use massive firepower to clear an area of possible mines and booby traps before sending in ground troops. This is the only way to ensure that these tactics will not work and the soldiers will not be exposed to unnecessary danger. And that brings us to developments in the negotiations for the release of the hostages. Incoming President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump, promised that the gates of hell will open if the hostages aren't returned and the warfare in the area doesn't come to an end by the time he's inaugurated. He directed these words at everyone, yes, even Israel. He's coming for his last term, wanting to establish his historical legacy, and he doesn't intend to let anyone spill his plans for any reason. He wants to go down in history as the one who restored America's status as the most powerful entity on the face of the earth. He won't allow the Houthis, Hamas, a few rebels in Syria, Iran, to dictate how his administration will be remembered. Trump's close aide, Steve Witkoff, arrived in Jerusalem yesterday straight from Doha, Qatar, with these points for Netanyahu and for those mediating the deal, all in that spirit. At the same time, Amos Hochstein explained in American diplomatic language to everyone that the story of the war in Lebanon is closed. On the 26th of this month, the IDF leaves Lebanon and the Lebanese army enters the area to exercise the sovereignty of the state of Lebanon. That's what Hochstein has declared, and we can assume that Trump feels the same way. A security official said that there's a new, determined boss in the neighborhood. He laid out the rules of the game, so let's see who will challenge him and cause him to open the gates of hell. In Israel, they say there is cautious optimism about the progress in negotiations. The arrival of Witkoff directly from Doha, Qatar, aims to speed up the negotiations and also press Israel to move forward in resolving the remaining open issues. For now, Israel refuses to provide any substantial information about how the talks are being conducted. Mossad Director Dedi Barnea has imposed a media blackout on the discussions, and only a small group at the working level of the Mossad, which manages the negotiations, is informed of the details relayed directly to the Mossad head and the Prime Minister of Israel. Here at TBN Israel, we'll continue to pray earnestly for our hostages' return. As always, we ask you to help us by spreading the truth and share our videos on YouTube and subscribe to this YouTube channel. I want to conclude by paying my final respects to the heroes of Israel who fell in the defense of our country. Master Sergeant in Reserves Alexander Fedorenko, 37 years of age, from Bat Yam, a heavy truck driver in Battalion 79 of the Strike Armored Brigade. Staff Sergeant Danila Dayakov, 21, from Male Adumim, of the 931st Battalion of the Nachal Brigade. Sergeant Yav Maayan, 19, from Modi'in, and Sergeant Eliav Estiukar, 19, from Ashdod, both from the 931st Battalion. Please pray for the safety of our soldiers, wherever they are, on the air, the sea, and the land, and pray for the return of our hostages from Gaza to Israel soon. And in order to make your prayers personal, I would like to introduce you to Daniela Gilboa. Daniela is a 20-year-old Israeli from Petah Tikva. She is the daughter of Orly and Ran Gilboa and has a younger sister named Noam. During her military service, Daniela served as a field observer in the Israel Defense Forces, the IDF, at the Nahal Oz base near the Gaza border. On October 7, 2023, she was abducted during an attack on her base. Footage from that day shows her injured and limping, being forced into a vehicle by her captors. In July of 2024, Hamas released a propaganda video featuring Daniela, marking the first sign of life since her abduction. Her family permitted the publication of this footage, hoping to raise awareness and expedite her release. This is a spiritual war, and we are fighting the forces of evil. And how do you fight a spiritual war? You pray. So keep praying for the peace of Israel, and most importantly, never forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and together we will win this war because God is on our side.